Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to address a topic that I don't really want to address, but a topic that needs to be addressed. And it's a topic of how sex affects the spirit, how it affects the life force, how it affects the amount of energy we have in any given lifetime. And there's a cap on that. If it's not preserved, if it's not basically increased, it's very hard to increase it, but if it's not increased and it's not preserved, then we have a very limited amount of life force, of spirit at our disposal in a single lifetime, spirit being different than soul, which I described in a video one or two videos ago. But getting right down to it, how does sex affect the spirit, the life force? Well, it depends on what kind of sex it is, not necessarily the positions or anything like that, but how it is used. Now, if you basically just have sex with somebody you don't love, that's going to use a lot of life force. It's going to use a lot of energy. And you can do this very many times in your lifetime, obviously, but it's going to be very hard for you to raise your consciousness, to raise the energy in your spine, the Kundalini, if you throw the energy away just nonchalantly or just easily or all the time. If it's somebody that you love, you join with them in a way that kind of combines your spirits, and there is some flourishing there, flourishing of spirit. If I'm not judging you based on these analyses. I'm just basically explaining how quickly your spirit is used, how quickly your life force is used. Now, if you practice Tantra, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what Tantra is. And, there's a lot of sex magic, I guess you could say, in Tantra. It's considered a left-hand path, but it is a path, a yoga, through which one can achieve union with God. But the very interesting thing about Tantra is that it's not necessarily about the release at the end. If you release through orgasm, be you man or woman, male or female, it doesn't matter, then you expend that energy. That life force basically goes externally from you, and it is separated from you. It is cast out. And if you're not using it to produce a child, you only have a certain amount. And if you're not doing it with someone that you love, it's going to be expended more quickly. It's kind of like a tank. Life force, spirit is kind of like a tank, and a tank of gas, obviously. But you only have a certain amount during a lifetime, and it'll go down over time. And when we find that we are old, we have expended much of our tank. It's much harder to maintain a hold on our mind, our consciousness, our understanding, our physical well-being if all this energy is expended freely and carelessly over time in our lives. But back to Tantra. The point of Tantra, the true point of Tantra is not to get that orgasm or release at the end. It's to redirect the orgasm up the spine. So basically you're not going to have the outward orgasm, the production of various sexual liquids, but you're going to redirect that energy up the spine, and the orgasm is placed there instead of outward. So you're getting your energy within your spine to raise between the pingala and the two different nadis, which are two different sides of the spine. And the spinal column obviously runs in between them. But you're getting that energy to go up the spine. And that's the whole point of using Tantra to achieve a spiritual end. It's not the release. You can increase the pleasure that you feel while practicing Tantra if you're good at it. You will increase the pleasure. But to redirect that pleasure, redirect that energy up the spine, will get that Kundalini to just shoot right up. If you can direct it inward and not release, basically. Now, there is a certain amount of spirit and life force that we have during a lifetime. And not everybody knows Tantra or wants to use it in that way. But I found that it's very difficult to come back to one's center when one engages in frivolous sexual activity, it's very hard to refocus oneself, even if it's not frivolous, even if it's with a loved one. It's very hard to focus on one's inward consciousness and nourish that consciousness, not outward directed energy, but inward consciousness. It's very hard to come back to that after sexual activity. And this is just a fact of life. It's not about me or anybody else judging you. It's just about using your life force in this or that way. And if you expend it, it's completely your responsibility. It's not about anybody disapproving of you spending it in that way. If you're just going to have sexual activity for the sake of it. Now, I'm not any better in this regard. I've spent plenty of my life force and spirit throughout my life. I don't think that I'm better in this regard. I'm just basically stating the facts. When you expend it, you will have a tougher time when you get older to hold on to the last bit of life force that you value so much. And would I recommend Tantra? No, this is just an explanation of what Tantra is and how it uses sexual energy. Tantra is a yogic path to God, but it is, like Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, it is the easiest path upon which one can fall. That's not the direct quote, but it's my understanding of it. And it really is, because if you're using desire and redirecting it up the spine, you can't direct it outward, and basically what is outward is what inspires desire. So you can't direct it to that outward source. You have to direct it up the spine, and that's very difficult. But I have, through my experience in sexuality, I found that my energy is greatly decreased by different sexual exchanges, and it's very outward practice to just do so frivolously. To do so without a purpose of making a child or union with a loved one, and that basically cuts to the core of it. I wouldn't even necessarily say be careful with your life force, your spiritual energy about orgasming and pushing that energy outward. I wouldn't say be careful with it. That's not really my advice. I'm just explaining how all of this works. You shouldn't, if you're at a stage where you don't think you can direct it up your spine or you don't want to. I don't think God's going to judge you or going to strike you down or you're going to get a bunch of bad karma. I just think that if you want to save it, if you want to redirect that energy, it's best to focus on inward spiritual practices, whether it be meditation, focus on the understanding of the self, how to reach the higher self, becoming one with God within, and putting that energy into that, instead of just spilling it outward. But this has just been kind of a rant on sex and spirituality, and kind of how your life force and your spirit are expended if you release it in the outer world instead of focusing it inward. And like I said before, I'm not a good example of somebody who focuses that energy inward. I just wanted to display some information on the topic before your analytical gaze. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, shoot them down in the comment section, and I will see you in the future.